I want to think and talk a little bit about having that relationship, the having a relationship with Jesus. And I want to get to the psychology of it a little more. I saw a post on Facebook this morning about a person that had awoken. It's a person that has deconstructed their Christian faith and their faith in God. And they were saying upon waking this morning, they woke in anxiety, and the default reactive response was to flee into prayer, even though she says she doesn't believe in God anymore and she doesn't believe in Jesus. But the reactive response to anxiety and fear of her was to flee into prayer, escape into prayer. And she was quite puzzled by it and disturbed. And I understand that because I have gone through it as well. And it took me a little bit of time to get out of the habit. But what that is over the lifetime of our growing up and living, because we are so surrounded by the emotion of fear and threat and insecurity. It's a normal place of living in fear and always living in anxiety and suspicion of danger happening to us. And so a neurological pathway has formed. You can think of it like a highway. It's a well-traveled road. When the vehicle drives the same road every day, it's going to create a rut. And so this default response of jumping into prayer is one of those psychological ruts that we often still do, even if we have deconstructed from our Christian faith for quite some time. There are lingering triggers and triggers to the past memory, and when a trigger like that comes up, our psyche, our ego is still functioning from the residual programming of fight and flight, fight or flight. And so flight would be to flee into prayer, the response of prayer, which is simply the unexpressed God help me expression, right? That we're all familiar with. God help me. God rescue me from this situation that I don't feel in control of. But all of that is just psychological and mental. And it's based in emotions that are not even a real thing. It's based in projections, imaginations that we have formed around an event in a past time that may have been a real event. And so now anything that feels like a similar threat will prompt a similar response, will prompt that response. So this is a rut in our psyche or in our soul, and we have to bring that out by consciously contemplating the trauma, the trauma event, and logically and rationally overriding it with a new neurological pathway. Chances are you're not in danger and your mind was simply replaying a past event that was triggered. So back to my initial thought of why we have formed a relationship with Jesus and why that is so important to many of us is because it was formed out of the need, out of a need and insecurity, because we feel so insecure and weak and helpless. It's the victim mindset that we need a savior. We can't do anything on our own. And so we have always kept Jesus close. Is it necessary to maintain a relationship with Jesus? It's necessary only as long as you don't resolve your traumas and rebuild your self-image. If we stay in the victim and the helpless identity, then we will always need a relationship to the bigger brother or to God that can save us at any given moment when it is necessary. But when we rebuild our self-image based on the truth that we are actually a piece of God, a particle of God, and we have all the divinity and all the strength and all the wisdom in ourselves, in our soul, in the same way that Jesus had. When we can rebuild ourselves in the divine image, in the image of God, rather than the image of the weak, fallible human, then you build yourself up in a strong persona, in a strong identity that is no longer fear-based and no longer needs a rescuer or savior. When that need for a savior falls away, the need for a relationship with Jesus falls away as well. That is not a bad thing. It's just one of those things that it's all according to your need. If you feel needy of a higher protector, a higher savior, then the relationship with Jesus is one to have. But once you really cognize and feel into and become consciously aware of who you are beyond this flesh body, the divine intelligence and wisdom and strength and power, the omnipotency of consciousness, you no longer feel reliant and dependent on another person, another entity, another God. When you become that very thing that you rely upon, you don't need relationship. You don't need relationship for the sake of need or protection or to derive value or worth from. You will have relationships as in camaraderie and friendship, but not to have a need met. And I think that's the difference. And that's why I can say without blinking an eye that I don't need to have the relationship with Jesus. I have become fully self-sufficient in my soul, in the identity of my divine soul, the everlasting soul that I am. Not that I have and that can be taken away, but that I am. So there is this direct connection to God as God, that there's no need to be afraid of anything. There's no need to be afraid. And when there is no need to be afraid, or when there's no need to fill up some lacking value, there is no need. All need is simply non-existent anymore. So yeah, so that's why a relationship with Jesus is not essential to life. It's only essential if you are living from a weak place, a helpless place. Don't know if that made sense, but here you go. These were my thoughts about that. It's not that I have animosity toward Jesus, can't stand the guy. That was initially an issue for me because I was so wounded and destroyed by the religion that was built around his name. So his name became a trigger. His presence became a trigger. But when I look at it objectively now, I have no need of Jesus. He can be Jesus. He can be Jesus to anyone who wants him in their life. But I don't have need for that identity of Jesus anymore.